I was summoned in 1968 by my Archbishop, who was then a new Archbishop to this place, James Knox. At the end of 1967, I was appointed as chaplain at RMIT. In mid-1968, I wrote and said that I'd settled in and finished the study program that I had hoped to do, which was in television production techniques, which was very amateur. And I knew more really than the teachers involved, as I'd been working in television for 5 years at that stage. And he told me he wanted me to do some more study, and I thought that was ridiculous. So I said, I'm not very interested, thank you very much. His answer was, I'm not that interested, you're not interested, thank you. I thought that was fairly heavy, and I'm sure it was. And I thought for a moment, in a matter of nanoseconds, if I ask him what he wants me to study, I reckon that might be, I could get out of here a free person, a free man, no problem. Because it probably wouldn't be interesting, and, that'd be, I reckon I could escape, and that'd be right. On the other hand, it might be interesting, and, well, we'll see. So I asked him, what would you like me to study, Your Grace? Which is the way you addressed archbishops in those times. And he said, whatever you find interesting, Father Brian, it'll be good for the church and the world. Good afternoon. Do let me know what it is, won't you? So I walked out of there thinking I'd been done like a dinner by this Vatican diplomat who'd now become Archbishop of Melbourne, which was true. And then I got to thinking that in reality, he hadn't told me what to do. He told me he trusted me to do something. As long as it was interesting for me, it would be all right. So it sort of, he met my criteria without sort of playing around. This is what I thought later on, And he was the Archbishop, and I was a very junior and very new priest, so what would I know? And I was frightened of archbishops then, still am. It was a major turning point for me because it sort of meant a new initiative, a new direction in the life that I've lived since then. I sent myself off, as I did with students who were unsure about what they wanted to do, and I sent myself to student counselling to see what they would tell me or suggest, and they ended up saying public relations would be good for you, it's what the church needs, And you obviously got style or something like that, whatever they said, I don't know. So I wrote to the Archbishop and said public relations, by which time I'd also registered for the course in public relations, which was a graduate diploma program at RMIT. And the boss man of the department, which was actually the Department of Management, came back from his teaching trip in the Caribbean. Actually, he'd been there to watch the cricket, but he was there as a teaching trip, and that was okay. And he came back and he was 6'5", a bit taller than you are, gangling, Bruce Hewell his name was, and he said, what bullshit is this? Get him in here. And by that time I knew all of the heads of department and all that sort of stuff, of course. And he said, the church doesn't need public relations people. Public relations people are basically people who try to make out they knew what was happening after it had happened when they had not a clue of what was going to happen anyway. And they're sort of con men. Church has got too many of them already. What it needs is people who understand management. You'll do management or nothing. I said, I'll do nothing. He said, no, you're going to do management because I've already registered you into management instead of public relations. And so I wrote to the Archbishop and said, I'll do management. I never got an answer back from the Archbishop. Like that. I don't ever remember hearing anything from him at all, except that he knew what I was doing. And then a year later, and this would be the beginning of 1969, I was summoned by the same big tall fella and said, you haven't been doing any work. I said, I've passed both subjects, thank you. He said, I know that. And I've passed them well. He says, I know, that's why I know that you haven't been doing any work. You're just coasting on what you already knew. I said, it's so. So I'm taking you out of the pastor program. You'll do the honours program or nothing. I said, I'll do nothing. He says, no, you're already in the honours program. Oh, by the way, be here at 5 o'clock next Monday because you're starting teaching the program that you were studying last year because somebody's sick and I need somebody to do it, and you know more about it than any of us do anyway. So that was the beginning of my, quote, university teaching career, if you want, and it's still around. There were sort of two major changing things. And then a few months later, he was doing some work with a company called Hammersley Iron in Western Australia, and he was looking at the industrial relations structure of the thing, setting some new initiatives in place, which I think today have just been turned over by the now Prime Minister for Industrial Relations, the Deputy Prime Minister, in the sense that the unions have forced the government, or the government has decided to respond to the unions, that there'll be no individual contracts between workers and unions. It all has to be done between workers and employer. It all has to be done by the union. So we get back to collective bargaining, which is exactly the opposite of any motivation, as I would see it in terms of that. Very good for the unions, supposedly, but it's funny how the union membership sort of keeps dropping and will continue to keep dropping, in my opinion. So he said he was doing this, and he needed somebody to have a look at the on-the-ground working groups. So I began sometime in late '69 working with Hammersley Iron, about 1 week a month, sometimes 2 weeks a month, working on team development and team building, as we called it then. That was the forerunner for me to open space technology. And I've been doing that ever since then too. So
there were 3 turning points
within that 12 months.
They
all complemented one another. They built on one another in a way that, in my language, would be totally unforeseeable. I mean, to even go on and do some further study for me was ridiculous. I mean, it's not something I'd done 8 years in seminary, and there was no point really.
The first thing was going on to do further study, and
what to study,
and then the
teaching, then consulting, beginning of consulting work. Fairly significant period of time, I think, from my point of view. Anyway, I think it looking back, it's very significant, but at the time it was very significant too. It was a big shift of ground for me. I don't know why. I just know it was. I think the next major turning point was in Santa Barbara, and I'm not sure what year it was. It would be quite some time after that, maybe. And I was talking with a fellow named Jerry Ramey, who's professor of organisation behaviour at Lewis Clark State College, and I was telling him about some of the work we'd done in team building work and all that kind of thing. He wanted to know how long I'd been using open space. And I said, really? What's that? He said, well, it's what you're doing, isn't it? I said, it is? He said, well, you must know about that, because that's exactly the sort of work you're doing. You're kind of working in non-directive, self-organising, getting them to kind of emerge with their ideas about what should happen, and not in any way directing in terms of facilitation. And I said, yeah, well, that's what I'm doing. He said, well, let's call it open space technology. I said, really? He said, yeah. So when did you meet Harrison Owen? I said, who? And he said, well, you're going to be in Washington next week, aren't you? In DC? I said, yes. He said, what if I call Harrison and see if I can organise? So the next thing I know, I'm being picked up by this guy with a funny hat at Dallas Airport and taken to his office, which is a local pub. We spent about 2 or 3 hours there. Then he took me to wherever it is I had to go. I don't remember. But I do remember, we talked about the kind of work I was doing. He talked about the kind of work he was doing. And at the end of it, I can remember him saying, well, Father, and he always used this word, Father, when he kind of wanted to be official, because he was an Anglican priest, as you know. And, well, Father, he said, there's not a lot I can teach you about open space. He said, you and I just need to work together to keep this going around the world and make it happen more widely. And so I think we ought to do that. So let's get on with it, shall we? And that was the end of that. And again, a significant shift in terms of putting a kind of, not a name so much, but a bit more formal structure to the kind of work that I had been doing. It didn't change it much, but it sort of put a pattern to it, and the other thing it did was put you in touch with people around the world who were doing this sort of work. It wasn't just Harrison or Jerry Ramey, but other people that you gradually met over the time. And I came back to Australia and thought it would be a really good idea if we kind of helped open space as it was a topic was known, and then worked through from there. And that was kind of, I think, another significant point in development stuff.